So, if we look at this section on the Unmoved Mover, there are really three issues that Aristotle has to deal with in terms of this Unmoved Mover, who is really God, the supreme being, the source of everything. The first matter is, does this being exist? And his arguments that it must exist, and that has to do with us having to account for the motion of the world, the fact that the world has certain characteristics, and we are led by argument to conclude that there must be this unmoved mover who accounts for the motion of the world, and that he is pure actuality, or that it, I should say, is pure actuality. That is, unlike creatures like us who are sometimes active and sometimes not active, who are sometimes actualizing their potential and sometimes their potential is in a way just sitting there, that this being, this substance, must be always active and always has been active, this eternal being. That's the first issue. The second issue is if is an unmoved mover, how exactly does the unmoved mover put the world into motion without itself being moved? That's a big question. That is, it would seem that to be an unchangeable, active, eternal being, that it would be necessary to not be affected by any other force, any other thing in the universe. So that's the second question. The third question, I think, is what exactly is God doing? That is, what is God? What is the activity of God that puts the world into motion? If we look at the beginning of Part 7, and again, annotations should clear up exactly what I'm referring to, we'll see that he does answer this second question in a way. That is, how does God move the universe without itself being moved? He begins Part 7 this way. Since this is a possible account of the matter, and if it were not true, the world would have proceeded out of night, and all things together, and out of non-being, these difficulties may be taken as solved. The solution is to say that there is an eternal being who is responsible for the world, that the world doesn't have some inexplicable, murky beginning, that there is an eternal being who has always been in existence and has always been doing the same thing, and this can account for the existence of the cosmos. There is then something which is always moved with an unceasing motion, which is motion in a circle, and this is plain not in theory only, but in fact. Therefore, the first heaven must be eternal. Now, I'm not an expert in anything, as you probably know by now, but I'm certainly not an expert in ancient cosmology or Aristotle's view of cosmology and astronomy, at least talking about the heavenly bodies, which he believes to be eternal and always moving in a circle. So he's referring to the stars, the sun, the moon, the planets, that is eternal, and that is moved, actually. No, it's not an unmoved mover. The heavenly bodies are moved by something else. The first heaven must be eternal. There is, therefore, also something which moves it. Now, here's where God comes in. What is it that put the heavenly bodies into motion in the first place and really keeps them in motion? There is, therefore, also something which moves it, and since that which moves and since that which moves and is moved is intermediate, that is, the heavenly bodies move and are moved, there is something which moves without being moved, being eternal substance and actuality. So the question, I guess, for Aristotle is really, how does God keep the universe in motion, and the visible universe, the heavenly bodies, the things that are obviously revolving around the earth, right? We know that that's really, frankly, not true anymore, but we have to have some sympathy for Aristotle's view of astronomy. How is it that those things are put in motion, and the thing that puts them in motion is not itself affected by them, it's not moved by them? here it is. And the object of desire and the object of thought move in this way. They move without being moved. The primary objects of desire and of thought are the same. He's actually solving or presenting a solution there which is very simple on the page. You might even miss it. How is it that God can move the universe without itself being moved? I mean, this notion of, if I move something, if I move this cup, I myself am moved. Pretty much everything that I do, every time I interact with the world, I am affected and changed somehow. But the whole idea of Aristotle's concept of God is that it is never changed, that it is doing the same thing continually, and that its activity is continuous and unchanging, so that it is never moved and never affected by that which it moves and affects. Well, he says the object of thought, the primary objects, the object of desire and the object of thought move in this way. That is, think about falling in love. You are moved by something in the world. You are affected and changed by something in the world. I mean, drastically, radically, right? But that thing, which is not really a thing, it's usually a person that you're in love with, is not moved. That is, they're moving you without themselves being moved. And on a more mundane level, think about the way that, say, hamburger can move you if you're hungry. Think about the way that the object of thought can move you, change you, your mental state without itself being moved. So what Aristotle suggests is that the unmoved mover moves the universe in a way that is analogous to the way that the object of desire or of thought can move the mind and the emotions and the feelings. And the object of senses. I mean, when I look at that, the Rice Krispies are still there. When I look at that box of Rice Krispies, I am in a way changed by it. At least my mental state, my senses, my mind in some way. But my being moved by it is not affecting it. That God moves the universe that way. And you can get very grand here. I mean, I guess the conclusion is that God moves the cosmos because the cosmos loves God. That is, the universe is put in motion because it loves and aspires to the divine being. And that's the way that God changes the world. And maybe there's some holes in that. We have to fill it out. But I think that that's a legitimate conclusion. So that's the second issue. How is it that God can be an unmoved mover? How is it that God can move the cosmos, move the universe without itself being moved? Because it moves the world in a way analogous to the way the object of love or the object of thought moves the heart and the mind.
So that's about the Rice Krispies.